Connecting You was a phenomenal project. It was absolutely amazing, and I can't even begin to give you a real sense of what went on it. It was huge. When the report finally is published, we have to hold it because the funder won't let us put it out to the public yet. When the report hits, it's a thesis. It's enormous.
Your thesis.
Yeah. My wife decided not to do a PhD recently, and I can well understand why. So we were one of the delivery partners and the evaluation partner. The main elements of the project, for the purposes of this, are that a number of organisations delivered to people who were identifiable as lonely, isolated, with transport solutions. The original title was Tackling Loneliness with Transport, which is a terrible title, which is why we came up with Connecting You. Or I say that, Karen, I think, who's online there, probably came up with Connecting You. Led by the council, Devon County Council. Among the organisations delivering to the end users were, I think, 14 or so who were grant funded, which is both an enlightened thing and a very brave thing for Devon County Council to do, because once they'd released that funding in packets of up to £10,000, there was no telling quite what was going to happen to it, and the range of projects that happened was enormous. In fact, you saw a little bit of the bike hub in Totnes, which was one of the Connecting You projects. Wellmoor, and Torie here is a project manager at Wellmoor, were both a funded organisation and delivered to people in the Morton Hampstead area, but also came and did the travel training that was one of the things that DCT delivered. We worked with organisations to help them support their clients who had trouble accessing particularly public transport, but for a lot of people that meant any kind of transport. That meant getting out of the house. So Torie's project evolved as a result of that, and I think we're going to hear definitely some of the good and the bad, and possibly a bit of the ugly as well. Thank you, Torie.
Thank you. Hi, yeah, so Wellmoor is a health and wellbeing charity based in Morton Hampstead, and we started a project called Devon Day Trippers, and it was actually the person who started it was my predecessor, and it was very much in response to COVID and the isolation that people were feeling from COVID and the lack of confidence of getting out. So the project was designed as a minibus project in the first phase, so that's sort of what I inherited, and the idea was that with about 12 people would go on each minibus trip, and we had a facilitator who was amazing, and a volunteer on every trip. And they went to all sorts of different places. They went to Dartmouth, Sidmouth, all the sort of Dartington, and had an absolute ball. We had they had a wonderful theme that went through each trip. Lucy, who was our facilitator, came up with this brilliant plan that they would knit a scarf, and that each trip the scarf colour, a stripe of the scarf would be knitted, and on the minibus everybody sort of took part in knitting the scarf. Well, probably some people took part in knitting the scarf. And on one trip that went to Slapton Sands at the end, they flew the scarf on the beach. So it was really brilliant. The reason that the project was brought about, as I say, was for COVID and the isolation, but Morton Hampstead, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is very kind of rural and very landlocked. There is public transport, but it's fairly limited. You can get into Exeter quite well, but to get to anywhere else is very, very difficult, because it takes an hour for that bus to get to Exeter. And then if you're going to change and do another trip to somewhere else, you've got to have a lot of resilience to do those kind of trips, and it takes such a long time to do the transport side of it that you don't have much time when you're there. So the trip, it was all very successful. We had millions of phone calls coming in. We really tried to make sure that the people who were going on the trips really needed to be going on those trips, and that's not always obvious, who really is lonely and who really is isolated. but we kind of combined with our warm hub, and we started getting people on the trips who really had hardly left Morden Hampstead at all. And with the evaluation forms that we had to do at the beginning and at the end, there were people who said that they would be very worried about going on any kind of public transport at all. And then we had the travel training, which kind of happened towards the end of the project. And through the travel training, we sort of, myself and one of the volunteers who went on most of the trips, who was wonderful, called Lisa, we kind of like, hang on, actually this has all been happening by minibus, but really there's a whole next step for this project, which was about going on public transport. And we're like, is that really feasible from Morden Hampstead? Like loads of the people were in their 80s who were going on this trip, you know. So then we were like, well, let's give it a go. So we got back to you guys and you said, yeah, you know, go for it, see if you can make it happen. And at the time, there was this Explorer bus that was coming through Morton and going across the moor and stopping in different places and going all the way to Plymouth. And so that's what made us think, yeah, but this will work. And then a week or so before the second phase of the project was starting and we'd planned all these trips, they just pulled the bus, completely pulled the bus. Oh my goodness, no. So then we had to just go back to the normal little buses. So we had to do much smaller groups because we had to make sure everybody could get on the bus. Like, what if you couldn't get on the bus, you know? And amazingly, we managed to do with a few taxis here and there for the return trip. We managed to do trips to Dawlish, to Exmouth, to Castle Drogo, to the what's it called, Oakhampton, Dartmoor Museum, and that was done mainly by public transport and then the odd taxi on the return. And that was really successful. And we did find that the numbers dropped. For a lot of people, it was just too hard to be going on public transport. But we used trains as well, and actually we had used trains with some of the minibus trips as well, and the train ones were really, really popular. And people had lost confidence on how to find train tickets because it's really hard to buy train tickets these days. So there was a big lot of support in buying train tickets on those trips and how actually to go about that, and also how to work out what the train times were. And Lisa was brilliant with her tablet showing people how to do it all and everything. And I suppose the legacy of the project now is that we do have a little group. It is really little, but they are going out on public transport in small little groups, which is really wonderful. We're trying to kind of keep it going because we've still got a tiny bit of that money left over, so we're supporting them because we always used to like pay for the refreshments and stuff, and to just really try and encourage people to go. And so the social side of it is so huge for people, and it is, I think actually it is an amazing way to break down barriers as well. So I've got one example, if I've got time. So there are these two brothers who live in Morton who both have learning difficulties. They're both in their 70s, and they had really never gone very far at all. And they used to rely on their older brother, I think, and he died during COVID. And so they were very just stuck in Morton Hampstead, really. And they, in their evaluations things, said they would never independently get on a bus even to Exeter. They came to our warm hub, and over time I kind of probably built up a kind of trusting relationship with them, and over time they agreed eventually to go on one of the trips. They went to Dartmouth, they saw live music, they came back and were talking about their trip at the warm hub, and before they'd been on that trip, at the warm hub they always used to sit on their own, and nobody really sat with them, and they didn't go and sit on anybody else's table. And then suddenly they came back from Dartmouth and they'd been on a trip with people, and they went and sat on those people's table and they talked about the music they'd seen and everything. And since then they went on quite a few trips. They're completely kind of integrated into the community. They now chat to people, they come to our community allotment, and it has made a massive difference. So, you know, there's people with learning difficulties, people who use the trips for respite care. That was a really big thing. And they chose the one day that they had care coming into the house to look after their partner. They chose to come on one of our trips because it was so sociable and it was fun. And that's what they just really needed. And it got them away from the world. It took them away. And I think for people, that's a massive thing. To actually, if you're in somewhere like Morton, it's a wonderful place. But it's really important to be able to get away. And the other thing was to see the sea. There were so many people who said to me, it's just so wonderful to be able to just go and see the sea. I can't get there. There's no way of getting there. So, yeah. So thank you for funding it, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. And that's the most regular question, is that project ever going to be able to start again?
We do our best.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Anybody would like to raise anything? Yes?
More of an observation than anything. I've been listening, we were discussing before the AGM started about transport poverty being something that's coming into vernacular in sort of aligning with fuel poverty, but it seems to me the poverty that is really in focus is the sociability of being reduced to not leaving. And I speak as someone who lives in a village which had one bus a week, which has been cancelled.
Yeah.
So I think,
and there were actually, what started happening through the project was that we were having regular phone calls from, well, we started picking people up from Lussley because we could, but we had South Seal and all those little villages saying, please can we come, we need to get out. So yeah.
well, it's really interesting to read the report, however long it is. Wonderful project.
We can
Yeah.
probably circulate it to trustees, couldn't we? It's just not
Which
actually
report?
the Connecting You.
We have. It's on the it's in the trustees' Dropbox. The report. It's just embargoed at the moment.
Oh right, so we're allowed to read it. I thought it was.
I know you can read it, but you just can't share it because it's a Department of Transport embargo until they decide to report it. I'm just going to see who's at the door.
So thank you.
Oh, hello.
Okay, everyone done? No more questions?
Find her. They're coming in. Come in.